My child didn't get off the bus today, so I don't know where my kid is.
Oh.
So that's what my husband's going to spend the next 15 minutes doing, is trying to track her down, I suppose. Hopefully he can figure that out.
Stafford wouldn't have picked her up, would he?
Maybe I should text him and ask him to. No,
'Cause
they go
that's why he was going to be late, because he has to pick up his.
Yeah, I know. No, it's a bit tricky right now with COVID and bus schedules and stuff. And the bus comes to my house right when this meeting starts, so it's anyway, that's the way it goes. Luckily, my husband's home today, so he gets to figure that out. So, Lindsay, were you saying that we need? Was it Scott that you said Cliff isn't coming? Okay, but we're waiting for Scott.
One more for quorum.
Okay.
I just got an email from Scott. He won't be attending the meeting today. And he forwarded some comments for the agenda package, so I'll forward them on.
So does that mean we hold off until Stafford?
If he joins within 15 minutes, yes. If he doesn't join within 15 minutes, we don't have quorum and the meeting's off.
Should I text him and say that?
Yes, it might be valuable.
Okay.
Yes, it's because this is a 7-person committee, not a 5.
Right.
I mean, no.
At this time, I'll let anybody who is viewing the meeting know that we're waiting for quorum. We currently only have 3 members of the committee present, and we need 4 to establish quorum. And if that's not established by 3:15, the meeting is adjourned until the next scheduled meeting. Thank you.
Kroll here.
Sorry, Councillor Kroll, I just saw you speaking and I wondered if you had a question.
I was actually speaking to the CAO on the phone.
Sorry about that. So Chair Ladwig, if you're wondering,
Sorry about that.
sorry about that. I was just going to say, if you're wondering, because this actually, we've never encountered this in our councils yet. As per the procedure bylaw, if after 15 minutes no quorum is established, the corporate officer records all names who are present, all names who are absent, and then we adjourn the meeting until the next scheduled meeting.
Okay, thank you. Just so everyone knows, Councillor Lumley has just texted me back. I believe he's on his way now, but whether or not he's going to make it in time, I don't know how rigid we are on the 3:15, but I take it we're rigid.
Oh, he's logging in.
Okay, there we go.
Saved by the Lumley.
Yes.
Back.
Hello, Councillor Lumley. Okay, so let me just get my right agenda open then. I was looking at this evening's agenda as we were waiting.
Chair Ladwig,
Mhm.
I notice one of the people in the gallery has his hand up. And I believe it's with respect to the first item on the agenda.
Okay, corporate officer, how do we address?
I would suggest opening the meeting as per normal, going through your usual steps, and if the hand is still raised at inquiries, we can address it at that point. That's the opportunity for public input. Of course, during the presentation of the first item, if they're here for that item, they can always be called upon then.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. It is now 3:14 according to my clock. So I'd like to call this Planning and Development Committee meeting to order. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Councillor Kroll, Councillor DeAndrade, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, moving on to reports. The first report in our agenda this afternoon is from our planner, Katie Thomas, and it's regarding the OCP and zoning amendment for 622 Hugh Road at 1161 Sunshine Coast Highway. So I will turn it over to Katie.
Hello, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, so the town of Gibsons received an application for an OCP and zoning amendment for the property at 622 Huff Road and 1161 Sunshine Coast Highway. It's the same property, just two addresses. The property owner has a new tenant looking to open an animal hospital in a vacant commercial unit. The current zoning does not allow for an animal hospital, and therefore the property owner has applied to change this. So the property is located at the corner of Huff Road and the Sunshine Coast Highway. The property is fully developed with a mix of commercial retail, a gym, the Holy Crap factory, and the majority of the site is used as a storage facility with individual storage buildings, as you can see in this image right here. The property is designated mixed-use commercial under the town's OCP, and the property was part of the boundary extension in 2009 and is currently zoned C5 under the SCRD's zoning bylaw 310. So this zone allows for a mix of commercial and industrial uses, and the property conforms to the SCRD zoning bylaw. The zoning, however, doesn't provide any detail on an animal hospital. So when we were looking through the definitions in zoning bylaw 310, there was a definition for an animal shelter, which speaks to the provision of animal care and rehab. And it was interpreted that since this use wasn't listed in the C5 zone, an animal hospital wasn't permitted on the site. existing animal hospitals in the town have a specific site zoning in the Upper Gibsons commercial district C1, which allows the use. So in order to rezone under the OCP's mixed use commercial designation, the property would need to rezone from the C1 zone, which would make the existing storage and manufacturing uses on the site non-conforming. So the applicant has also applied for an OCP amendment to retain the industrial uses on the site. So as you can see, prior to, oh, I think I'm just going to go back here. Okay, so prior to 2015, the property was, oh no, sorry. The property surrounding the site are zone C5. So the site is right here. Our mapping system right now doesn't show the exact properties on this map. So we've got C5 here. We've got SERD residential rural in this gray color. And then you've got SERD industrial right here. So prior to 2015, the property was designated under the Elphinstone OCP as commercial industrial mixed use. This designation has a number of objectives, such as recognizing the existing commercial and industrial area in the Highway 101 Pratt Road intersection area, recognizing the area as a gateway to the adjacent Gibsons commercial area, and promoting types of commercial, multifamily, and light industrial development that would complement the commercial development in the Upper Gibsons area. So this is the SERD Elphinstone OCP, and this map over here is the town of Gibsons OCP. So the town of Gibsons redesignated the property under the 2015 OCP update and brought the property into the OCP and changed the OCP designation to mixed use commercial, which allows for a wide range of retail and office use, restaurants and visitor accommodations in a pedestrian orientated environment. It also allowed for residential uses as a secondary use, but this designation removed the industrial land base. So moving forward, the town have developed a new OCP land use designation under the direction of the Area E OCP, Commercial Industrial Mixed Use Land Use, and we've created the Mixed Use Gateway, which is enclosed as attachment B in the staff report. This land use designation intends to recognize the existing commercial and industrial areas along the Sunshine Coast Highway from Huff Road to Pratt Road as a gateway to the Upper Gibsons commercial area. The OCP amendment includes a number of policies to encourage an active pedestrian and customer-orientated street frontage while allowing for multifamily residential either above or behind commercial and in light industrial uses. And it's thought that this would transition from the residential rural to the Upper Gibsons commercial area. The form and character development permit would stay the same, which is DPA number 3. And this would provide a continual form and character along the highway in Gibsons Way. So we looked at creating a new zone that would implement the OCP mixed use gateway designation. And this zone would allow for a number of commercial and industrial uses, including a vet animal hospital, as well as apartments and townhouses, either above or behind the commercial and industrial uses. And while this property is fully developed and they don't have any future plans to redevelop, the zone includes a maximum residential base density of 3 dwelling units and a maximum floor space ratio of 1 for apartment or townhouse use, subject to community amenity contributions based on an economic analysis. So the application was referred to a number of departments and agencies. As you can see here, we didn't have too many comments. We did speak with Scredo, who was supportive of retaining the industrial land base within the town of Gibsons boundaries. And we have some more specific comments related to waste management here. So the application was referred to the SCRD, and they looked at the regional solid waste management and planning. And it should be noted here that the property owner would be applying for a tenant improvement building permit just to renovate the inside of an existing commercial unit. So there's no significant construction proposed. In terms of finance, as the OCP and zoning amendment is not changing the existing uses on site, the assessment of the property will not change, and therefore there is no financial plan implications to this OCP amendment application. So here we have the recommendations. They're also listed on page 1 of your staff report under the agenda. And we have Harley and Blaine Hagedorn who are available to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to receive that report? Councillor Crowell, Councillor D'Andrade, thank you. All in favor? Okay, open for discussion. Anyone? Councillor Crowell?
And the only question I have is, and I think it's a great reuse of the space. But I was just wondering if it's one of our existing vets or it's a new vet in the community.
I guess we'd have to turn that over to attendees. Blaine, we can see you now, but we can't hear you. Still can't hear you, Blaine.
I'm trying.
There you go.
I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. I believe the proposed tenant is in another location at this point in time.
Okay, great. I think it's an excellent use of the space, and you know, I would certainly be in favor of moving the recommendations as proposed by staff.
Okay. I'd like to give other people an opportunity to comment if they have any before we move forward with that. Councillor D'Andrade.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Crow, and the report was actually excellent. So as I'm reading and I had questions, the report answered all the questions. So I look forward to hearing from the neighbors, and I support to carry to the council meeting.
Okay. Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, my question's actually for Katie. Is this new zoning area or designation, has it been used in Gibsons already, or is this the first time that we've rezoned a property with this zoning designation?
So this would be a brand new zone and a brand new OCP land use designation as well.
Okay. Now, sorry, I'm going to ask a couple more questions. Will this get away from like rezoning? Because it seems odd, like even when I read this report earlier, that somebody just couldn't put an animal hospital in like a M5 or a commercial industrial area. Like I was thinking, wow, like that must be a really specific zoned use area for an animal hospital. But is that this gateway designation mixed use that's going to alleviate all this potential rezoning, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, it allows for a number of uses. So in your attachment, I think it's C, it lists all the uses that you would be allowed to do on this site. So it includes a number of manufacturing, commercial uses, and it specifically talks about a veterinary hospital and a veterinary clinic. Now we have two definitions. A veterinary clinic is for the care of animals during the day, and a hospital allows for overnight accommodation of animals for veterinary purposes, not for boarding use.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I actually have a question for Katie as well, just before I move on to Councillor Kroll. I was curious to know what Squito's concerns were, why they didn't support the rezoning.
They support the rezoning. They were looking specifically at industrial land base in the town of Gibsons. So right now we have a very specific area that is zoned for industrial, and they don't want to lose that. So they were happy to see that this zone would allow for industrial lands, and also they were happy to see that the portion that we're looking at right now is a larger property that would allow for industrial, whereas the specific area in the Venture Industrial Way has much smaller properties that kind of limit what you can do on those sites in terms of industrial uses.
Okay, so they were in support of this.
Yes.
I read that differently in the report then. Okay, thank you. Councillor Crowell.
Thank you, Chair. The other question I had is, because it is a hospital and animals obviously would be staying, is there going to be a residential unit incorporated into the redevelopment of the space to provide for 24-hour care?
I haven't seen the detailed plans of the vet hospital, but I believe that there's meant to be an office space. I don't know if there's overnight accommodation.
Okay.
For people, sorry.
Mr. Hagedorn may be aware of?
Harley's here. Maybe he could answer that.
You might have to ask the corporate office. Oh, there we go.
At any rate, this.
Sorry, I haven't seen any plans for any overnight accommodation for the hospital.
Okay. Just to follow up, you know, having had animals at vets and having to keep the animal in overnight, it's always sort of reassuring for a client to know that there is someone on site, and the zoning would permit. There's already one residential unit on the site, I believe, so it would be permissible to, if it did work within the redevelopment, to provide that security for the facility and the patients.
Yeah, I think the idea is to have it staffed around the clock.
Okay, great. Thank you, Harley.
Okay, so we've got a number of recommendations here, and I believe Councillor Crowell made a motion to accept them all as written. Is that correct, Councillor Crowell?
Yes.
And okay, and Councillor DeAndrade, it looked like you seconded it. All right, so is everyone agree? Does everyone support that? Me too. Great. There you go, you guys are done. We will move on to the next phase, which is a public hearing. So thank you.
And just follow up, that does go to board tonight.
Yes, yes, it goes to our regular council meeting this evening at 7. All right, moving on to the next report in our agenda then. The next one is from the Director of Planning on the short-term rental bylaw and scheduling of a second public hearing for that particular piece of work. So over to you, Director of Planning.
Thank you, Chair Ladwig. So this report has been deferred from October 6th, I believe. Sorry, just looking back here. So the recommendation, it recommended a public hearing for October 21st, which has passed. So the recommendation would change again. But I believe that Council deferred this because Council wanted to discuss it more. So I don't have direction at this point on how to proceed. So that's what this discussion is going to be about today.
Okay, thank you. Motion to receive the report. Councillor Crowell, Councillor DeAndrade, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, we'll open it up for discussion. It is a little unfortunate that neither of our members of the community are here today or aren't here today. I'm not sure how folks feel about that, but does anyone want to kickstart the conversation? Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you. If I may, Councillor Ladwig, I have 2 questions and then I have some points I would like to make. So my first question for the Director of Planning, actually, if does the town require liability insurance for the STRs?
No.
No, okay. And is there a reason why?
Not necessarily. I mean, we ask, I think in our business license bylaw, through the amendment where we've got a checklist for them. And in that checklist, we ask them to get insurance for their STR, but we don't ask for a copy of it or keep a record of it.
Okay. I mean, it just raised some concerns because I know the owner is supposed to be home, but you know, the owner also goes out for something. And anyways, if anything happens in the neighborhood, but that's good. My second question is, do we have, sorry, you might have presented, I just don't recall, do we have a fine schedule or like a non-compliance you know, or revocation of policy in place? If, you know, I know we comment and there was feedback or 3 strikes or something, but I don't remember seeing anything.
We do, yeah. So there's an amendment to the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw as well, and that included penalties. So for operating without a business license, for operating contrary to zoning, there were a number of contraventions that were included in that, which could receive tickets. So sorry, our network went down today and I was hoping to have it all in front of me and I don't, but we had a list of fines, contraventions, and they could be all added up. I believe they started at around $200 or $300 per contravention, and there could be a number of tickets for each, and they could be ticketed daily. So we do have the enforcement capacity through the business license amendment bylaw, or the enforcement bylaw, sorry.
Did we get to a point of a revocation policy in case, I don't know if there's a number of infractions or something? Do we have anything?
Right. Yeah. At that point, we could take the business license away or revoke the business license for not complying.
Okay. Perhaps I'll wait my comments after a round. Oh, thank you.
Councillor Crowell?
Yeah, sort of the ball's sort of squarely back in our court after the last public hearing, and it seems that the largest sort of opposition to the proposed bylaw was how we deal with short-term rentals that are not host operated, or that the host isn't resident on site. You know, and I totally appreciate concern from the business community that not having this option with the community sort of impacts on tourism, it impacts on local business. But there is still the issue of the problems that occur with, you know, a unit that is unsupervised. So, you know, we obviously have to, before this proposed next public hearing, have something in place that, you know, that is a compromise that people can live with. I think, you know, if I can appreciate, and, you know, I will admit myself, we had a family reunion and I rented a house. We had the whole house, but the sort of manager of the house was across the street. And she commented to us a couple of times. She wondered if we were in fact using the house because it was that quiet. But I could see this particular house, you know, there were occasions, you know, we were able to have a sit-down dinner for 22 people. So the house does afford the opportunity of being problematic. You know, so I fully appreciate where people were coming from. That, you know, they want the privacy of being able to host a family reunion or a family gathering, but you know, we still need to come down with a nuts and bolts way of dealing with the problem places. So I notice, I think, if an owner is resident in Gibsons and is willing to, attend the location if there's a problem, and that the neighbors within a certain radius are given contact information for that person, obviously the owner of the property is going to be the best person to police it. And usually if there's a complaint, the people complaining about the complaint, it's like at 2 o'clock in the morning where our bylaw officer is not available, and it becomes an issue of how do you prove that they were noisy. So I think, in a situation where the owner is resident in Gibsons and can respond in a reasonable time, I'm willing to sort of make that situation available. But, if someone's managing 5 or 10 properties and they're all over the community and they don't even live in the community, there's a bigger problem there. And I noticed,
But if they're managing properties and they do live in the community,
if they're willing to respond, it's, but, I'm looking for some common ground here, and I'd really appreciate, other councillors sort of feeling, because this was the real sticking point with the bylaw, was the number of complaints of people. But the other thing I hate to see, and I've seen it happen just recently in the community, that a property that was long-term rental has now been sold and purchased, and it's being run as a short-term rental. So three rental units have been lost, and it's now potentially a party house in the middle of a fairly quiet residential area. So,
okay, so thank you for that. I'd like to hear from Councillor Lumley now. Just give him an opportunity to chime in here.
Thank you. Obviously, we hear a lot from people that have STRs and are involved in the industry, and I can appreciate, any compromise to their current situation. I don't agree with the fact that that our tourist business is inherent to increasing the number of STRs we have. Probably one of the greater problems in this town is that any hotel that exists here needs substantial upgrades. I mean, our venues for hotels is and no offense to anybody that owns a hotel, but I guess I'm going to offend you. It's pretty bleak, to say the least. But I know that's not what this is about. But and I understand that STRs are busy. Like, I guess anybody that owns STRs can get on here and tell us how busy they are and how they kick back to the economy. But having like 1 million people here doesn't necessarily translate into helping everybody in the economy. I mean, having a business that's primarily based on tourism, which most businesses are in a lot of areas. I mean, most businesses can't even handle any more traffic. So I don't think a small reduction in the amount of STRs I mean, we saw the housing needs assessment. I don't think we learned anything from that differently than what we thought we'd see. I mean, you could have guessed what was going to be in that. We don't have any rentals. And then you read the report, and Gibsons is the highest. We rely the most of any community on the Sunshine Coast for rental units. So, I mean, clearly we have to do something to add to the long-term rental stock. And owners of STRs say they don't impact it, but I mean, clearly you do. So I go back to our previous discussions. Do I think the owner of the STR should have to be a resident of the same residence? No, I don't. I think they should be a resident of Gibsons. I don't think people that live in Vancouver or West Vancouver should be buying up real estate, speculating in real estate, and paying for the mortgages with vacation STRs. I don't think that's a good formula for the town. I think the people that own them should be residents of Gibsons. The money will come back into the community because they do live here. And I think then at that point, as far as how many, I think the number of people that have STRs, there should be some sort of restriction on, and my, which I still believe, would be if you wanted to add another STR to your portfolio of STRs, then you'd have to add a long-term rental property as well to that. So I don't, if somebody has a really good idea of how to increase our long-term rental stock other than that through this bylaw, then I'd be happy to hear it. But I mean, that would be, I think, reducing the number of STRs that one person could have somehow. Because as Councillor Kroll said, if somebody can just buy a home and turn it into 3 short-term rental units, that doesn't bode well for people looking for rents. And I'm sure if you look up on Craigslist right now, there's nothing in the town, or very little. But if you looked on Airbnb or VRBO, there's over 140 STRs that are available or potential to rent. So, I mean, something has to change for sure. So those are my thoughts.
I'd like to chime in if I could. So personally, I do support having an on-site operator in the residential zone. As I said at our last meeting, I believe Councillor Lumley might not have been at this meeting, but I raised the fact that I personally feel that people that buy up residential property for the sole purposes of running a commercial venture is a misuse of the residential zone. That's not what the residential zone is meant for. And so I started thinking a lot more about STRs and commercial properties, and we had quite a bit of discussion around that. Right now, so it created a lot of interesting discussion and email with staff on this topic, and it turns out that we only have 3 properties in our tourism hub, Gibsons Landing that is currently zoned for tourism accommodations. That's the George Hotel, which obviously isn't developed yet. The undeveloped lands across from the Barefoot Gecko, and the Ritz Hotel, which is sitting vacant right now. So we essentially have no tourism accommodations, no commercial tourism accommodations in Lower Gibsons, and have essentially unintentionally pushed tourism accommodation out into the residential zone. And although I do think there's a place for that as a home-based business, I don't feel that it's appropriate that we just allow residential properties to be bought for commercial venture. That's not what it's for. And so I do support having on-site operators in residential zones with the thinking that this is a home-based business. What I would like to see, and by the end of this meeting, I'll be making a motion to this effect, is that we allow unhosted facilities in commercial properties. So things like the Beachcomber Cafe, who has an STR above their shop. I think that's a great example that we should be encouraging in this town. I think, having small businesses that can supplement their annual income with a small STR makes perfect sense. Now we've got zoning issues around that because apparently they're not zoned to have tourism accommodation, but that's kind of a separate issue. But from this bylaw perspective, I think it's hard. Like, I don't understand why we would require a commercial operator to have an on-site operator, because people don't live in their commercial properties. That's not what it's for. So that's what I'm promoting. I'm going to be promoting a motion to allow unhosted STRs in commercial property. But I'm not, yeah, okay. I'll open that up. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. I think what we need to do is get the sort of short-term rental bylaw in place. Going back to something that Councillor Lumley was saying, and I agree with, I'm fully in support of people that are living in the community, and if they are resident of Gibsons and they have an unhosted short-term rental. I think if people live off coast, have a short-term rental that is not hosted, or multiple short-term rentals that aren't hosted, they're operating a business. And, you know, they should be taxed appropriately. Aside from requiring a business license, they should be applying for a temporary use rezoning for a business and be paying appropriate business taxes. And, you know, I would have no objection with pursuing things in that direction. You know, I would suspect, and this is purely hypothesis on my part, but I would think probably, you know, again, Councillor Lumley referenced the local hotel scene. There's been no incentive for some of these people to upgrade because a lot of their business isn't coming to them because it's going to alternate sources. And until they're in a financial position to say, I'm going to build a new hotel or I'm going to redevelop my existing thing, they're not going to do it until they have, you know, business that warrants it. And, you know, we're sort of saying, you know, we'd like to see a nice hotel, but in the meantime, we're condoning, you know, competition against them. So, you know, there needs to be a balance found there. But I think we have to give some direction to staff if we want to be able to come back to a public hearing. So I think, you know, I do agree with what's been suggested with if it's a resident owner of a facility that, and they're going to be responsible towards it, that it not necessarily be hosted. Something I noticed in the seashell bylaw, they have a requirement that the owner or a representative of the owner check people in. And I know for a fact, a lot of the unhosted Airbnbs don't do that. It's they're given a punch code combination for the door, and that's about it. They don't even know if the people they rented to are the actual people that are checking in, which is an unfortunate situation, particularly where an Airbnb is impacting on a residential neighborhood. Seashell also requires that you keep a list of the guests and contact information for the guests. You know, I know from talking to the regional district bylaw people, you know, they're just hamstrung sometimes because they've had something happen and they have no follow-up. They have no means of even contacting the owner because some of these Airbnbs are numbered companies. Now, I understand through the tax rules, there has to be a person's name associated with, even if it is a numbered company. That's, I believe, coming up in the new year. So part of that problem will hopefully be alleviated. But I think we need to get some points for staff to get them moving with something that we can take to a public hearing before we're into another tourist season.
So,
Sorry about that. Councillor DeAndrade.
thank you. I have some comments. I've done some research with about unhosted because I believe in certain instances when a person has a vacation home and is using even more than half, but he has the space and they won't come whether they live in town or outside. I don't think it matters in this regard. What matters to me is what I've seen other municipalities doing, and in the States, there are many examples. They cap the number of short-term rental nights that an unhosted property can do, unhosted short-term can do. So that you would take from, so if someone has an unhosted and wants full-time, like investing in STR, they can't because it's capped. Right, so this is one way. For example, in Jersey City, New Jersey, they kept at 60 days. In San Francisco, they kept at 90. Portland kept at 95 days. So we can choose how many days. So you still allow the person that has a vacation home, you know, have some unhosted people. And then to solve the problem, we must require that there is a person that whatever distance that received the guests, you know, the comments that was taken. But I think it is important to allow, because, you know, if you cap the number of nights, they won't be able, they have to use the house. Another thing that I found interesting, the comment, because I think it was Councilor Lumley that said, well, if the person lives in town, they can have, but if they have two properties in town, are they making two of the properties unhosted? So we should also cap unhosted, only one house per owner, for example, right? And capped in a number of days. So no one that has a house and is not using would do unhosted, because they would be able to rent only 60 days in a year. So that's, to me, is a solution that seems, the issue now becomes, can our bylaw officer reinforce that? And I believe in this case for unhosted, there should be a commensurate rate, not necessarily double of the hosted, because I think we should come down to the numbers and say, what is the cost of having, I know we hire now a part-time bylaw officer. I think it's just to help Sue, but it's not even a full-time, it's a casual. So how can we build, because we also have other needs, but the short terms is a need, right? If you want to run whether hosted or unhosted in a way that does not impact the neighborhood, we will have more reinforcement. So I think capping the numbers, I like the idea of considering zoning requirements. That was a great, and fines and revocation. And what I've seen in other towns as well, and other municipalities, they do the liability insurance for STRs. So we can require that unhosted has a liability in case, something happens and impacts the neighbor. So actually in San Francisco it's 500,000, the liability insurance. So I believe there are many options that can solve the problem. We still gonna ensure that we have housing, because at the same instance, allowing everybody that has a home do a STR, you also shrink the affordability, because if I build a house in the back and I do a long term, I'm supporting housing in Gibsons, but if I do a STR, I'm not. So I think just to penalize unhosted, I don't see that there is the way. We need to allow for unhosted, but under very strict circumstances and enforceable. And through my research, I see many towns and cities that are doing.
Okay, thank you. Lots of suggestions and different thoughts. Okay, I will, hold on, Councillor Lumley, I'll take your comment. And then I'm hearing a lot of ideas, and I'm wondering if maybe we need to start moving to motions, and we'll just start to see who supports what and where it goes. But I want to hear from Councillor Lumley first.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that we just rezoned a property that includes vacation rentals. So the property that we just rezoned, or we haven't rezoned it yet, but we voted to take it to council tonight. Yeah, it includes vacation property on the list, on the list of new uses for that designation. So anyway.
But I will point out that it requires a host.
Well, no, it's commercial. You just said they could just throw in a bunch of STRs in there now, I guess.
No, because the rest of the bylaw says you can only have one suite. So this is why I'm not saying commercial. If it's more than one suite, then they should be applying for a hotel. Like once you get to a certain size, it's like, well, you're now into a hotel category. But if somebody wants one STR above their commercial property, go for it. Who's it going to bug? Doesn't bother me. But that's another conversation. Okay, Councillor Crowell, or no, sorry, Councillor DeAndretti, you had a comment earlier, I think.
I think that the way I'm seeing, I think the best way, the most efficient way with regard to the unhosted is to council direct staff to prepare a report containing unhosted bylaw regulations and accompanying a fine schedule that considers the current housing market and neighborhood impact. So I presented a series of options, other councillors presented as well. If staff prepares a report with all the alternatives, then we can bring back to the PDC and have everything compiled, because there's also another option. For example, you can say what I saw in other municipalities, for unhosted, they can say in terms of distance minimum or maximum per area or things like that. So there are many mechanisms in place, but perhaps staff can prepare and bring back to us.
Okay, before I go to Director of Planning, I just want to say that that is what staff have done already for us, and we are now sending it back and sending it. But anyways, okay, Director of Planning.
Thank you, Chair. Would it be helpful? I've got all the bylaws in front of me. Would it be helpful to look at what we have in place and then work from there and point towards what you would like changed? Because we do have a list of enforcement requirements. We do have a list of business license requirements. We have the zoning designation, and we've had first and second reading of this bylaw already. So at this point, what we're doing is we're tweaking what we've got, and in order to get clear direction from the PDC and council, and in order for me to bring back a bylaw that suits you, it would be helpful to look at this and work with what we've got and get a clear understanding, because I'm hearing commercial, allowing it in commercial. That is a pretty straightforward change. It could imply that because each apartment unit is an individual unit, it could mean that the apartment unit could essentially look like a hotel if every single unit wanted to do a short-term rental.
But they're all residential units above a commercial zone, right?
That's right. Yeah. We do have a provision in here to say that if it is an apartment, that the strata has to approve it.
Mhm.
So there would be that strata to sort of monitor that or change the bylaws if they no longer want, say 50, maybe 50% of the units rented out as short-term rentals. And we could tweak the section about having a person living on the property full-time. But would it be helpful for me to go through what we have now, just as a refresher, or are you pretty comfortable with?
Would it be possible to share screen then if we're going to do that? Like, I find this hard.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Does everybody want to do that? But I'll just do a time check. It's 4 o'clock now. We know this is a big, when we keep kicking this back. So we've got the time. We might as well take advantage of it. Councillor DeAndrade.
Would it be possible, just the points that we focused? I think what I understand is, I think one of the issue is vacation properties, people who wants to rent. So which will be the unhosted in this case. And I think my understanding, that's where we are having this discussion. So if we could focus in solution, if this is feasible, right? I mean, having a person, whatever the bylaw already exists, and we tweak and say having a person no more than whatever distance or no more than X number of minutes, and checking the clients and things like that. And minimum, if people have 2-3 properties in town, are they allowed to do unhosted in all of them? Capping in this scenario, if we could go over.
So I could go over it in probably 5 to 10 minutes. Probably
Okay.
5 minutes. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's just, it means a lot, but it's not a lot of text. So
Okay. Please
do you want me to share my screen? Yeah, okay. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yeah, can you enlarge that by any chance, or?
Yeah. Is that better?
Mhm.
Okay, so essentially this is from the zoning bylaw. So what this will do is zone for it, and people would automatically be allowed to do it as long as they get a business license. Short-term rental would be permitted in any zone that permits a principal residential use, but is not permitted in an apartment building unless the apartment building is located in a zone that allows tourist accommodation. So this amendment is pretty straightforward. If you wanted in all the commercial zones, we could just list the commercial zones here that allow commercial and residential. and is not permitted in the marine, industrial, live work, or institutional zones. Every short-term rental accommodation operation is subject to all of the following conditions. The first point was the sticking point. So short-term rental accommodation shall be administered by a person who lives on the property full-time, and that person must be present on the property during guest stays. So that clause right there says it has to be hosted. Somebody has to be there hosting the guests. And then the second one, short-term rental accommodation use shall occupy not more than one dwelling unit or sleeping unit per property for the duration of the guest stay. So that means an entire property can't be used as a vacation rental. No external indication shall exist that a dwelling unit or sleeping unit is used for short-term rental except for a small sign. You have to have a business license. Parking is required except that they can park on the street or have tandem parking. And then if there's a sleeping unit in an accessory building, you have to register a covenant to prohibit the conversion of that accessory building into a dwelling unit. So that's a very high level section of the zoning bylaw that highlights some of the areas that council's considering changing or discussing changing. Can you see this page as well if I change my PDF?
I can see it. I wish it was larger. You can just click the plus sign, even just the plus sign next to it. That will enlarge it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is the short-term rental accommodation attestation. So this is part of the business license amendment. The safety measures in place is they have to install smoke alarms, fire extinguisher. They have to put in a fire safety plan. They have to make sure the egress is unobstructed, so bedrooms and windows for fire exits. They have to have carbon monoxide, and they have to maintain interior and exterior passageways free of obstructions. The terms is an operator resides on site and we will be available during all guest stays. So that is sort of something we're discussing changing now. No more than one guest suite can be used for short-term rental accommodation on a property at a time. Again, that's to make sure that entire property isn't used solely for a short-term rental with multiple suites in it. They have to submit a parking plan. They have to show their business license number in advertising. They have to display a copy of the business license, operator's name, phone number, and email address on the property. They have to keep a written record of all guest names and contact information, and they have to obtain insurance for short-term rental accommodation. So those are the business license requirements, and they have to tick it all and sign it. And then here are the bylaw enforcement measures. So if they're not complying with the terms and conditions for operators of short-term rental accommodation, we've got a fine for that. If they refuse an inspection by a town representative or fire department, then they get ticketed. If they list it or advertise a short-term rental exceeding the approved sleeping unit count on a business license, there's a fine. If they operate a short-term rental accommodation contrary to zoning, operating short-term rental accommodation without a principal resident, so we would have to change that piece as well. Occupying a short-term rental in more than one dwelling unit or sleeping unit for the duration of a guest stay, operating without a business license, or not meeting parking requirements. Those are all the violations that we have listed. So that's it. I just wanted to bring that up and refresh the PDC on what we have on the table right now.
Okay, thank you, Director of Planning. Yeah, I like it the way it is, to be honest. I'm fine with it. I'm hung up on the commercial thing. I think people that are paying 3 times as much in taxes should have a right to run that business on a commercial property, and requiring a hosted site or requiring an on-site operator in a commercial property is not realistic. So that's my one sticking point. But I do believe that moving away from requiring an on-site operator does mean that we'll have more properties that are not being rented out long-term. It's just it's the way it goes. And I understand that people own, well, no, the more I think about it, people that are renting out, most people that are renting out their properties and say that it's their vacation property and eventually they want to live in it, but they need the short-term rental income to pay the mortgage and, so they can use it once in a while. It means they're probably living off coast and want to come and use it once in a while when they come to vacation. And I understand that, but it doesn't change the fact that that house is now sitting there, not contributing to the community from a community standpoint, neighborly standpoint, and is not providing a long-term rental for somebody else or being purchased by someone that's going to own the property and live there full time. So I support the current bylaw the way it's written, with the exception of the one condition that I've raised. Councillor DeAndrade, I saw you had your hand up.
Well, I was just wondering for the people that they do have a vacation home and they come half of the year, but they don't do for another part. So I believe if we cap the number of days, of nights that they can rent, I think it will be feasible. The only question that's a question for staff to provide feedback if this will be enforceable, right? And perhaps if they have higher fees or things like that, that's what I'm thinking. But I think it would allow, and then they would have to, if it's just an investment and they are not coming at all, then they would put on the long-term market. If they are coming, then they would say, okay, we still can make extra to support our property, but we are capped at 60 days, for example, and that's it, or 90, whatever council decides.
Okay, it is an interesting concept. Director of Planning, would you be able to provide any guidance to Councillor DeAndrade about the enforceability of that?
Yes, sorry, I'm not sure if you could hear me, but my internet connection is slowing down. There we go. Yeah, so I have seen that in some municipalities where they allow short-term rentals for a limited amount of time. I can follow up with those municipalities and see how the enforcement of that is going. But yeah, we could add that to the violation table if exceeding the number of days permitted, or that would align with the business license enforcement capability anyway. It's just tracking that could be challenging. But are you talking about unhosted short-term rentals that would be limited to, say, a 2-month period?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can look into that.
I mean, I will say I have personal friends that do rent houses in Gibsons and the SCRD for 9 to 10 months out of the year, and then they get evicted for the summer because the owners come and vacation for the summer here on the Sunshine Coast, and they go camping. And they, it's not ideal for them, but it provides them housing for 9 to 10 months out of the year. So, I mean, there's other ways that people can go about this too. So I'm just putting that out there. Councillor Kroll.
The capping thing, there's pros and cons with it. Is, as you suggest, is not necessarily is the house going to come back into the rental market, so it's going to sit empty, which is causing insurance issues for the owner of the house, because unless the house is being attended daily, your insurance is invalid. So it's, I don't know that, and capping I think is going to be very difficult to police, because who's going to police it? Are we going to have to go and check every day that someone's there? Because not necessarily is the owner going to tell you, and by the time you get reporting back from the hosting companies, or we have to subscribe to one of the companies that monitors hosting companies, which is expensive. So we'd probably be offsetting the cost of, I'm just a little concerned about the complications of the capping. I think what we need to do is just come down with some very clear direction on what we will allow for non-hosted units. And going back to what Councillor Lumley was suggesting, is that if people are living in the community and they have a second property that they are operating as a short-term rental, that I'm not so adverse to that. The question I would have is, they are in fact operating a business, and should they be paying appropriate taxation on that property if it isn't their primary home that they're operating as a short-term rental? But I think we need to start at the beginning and work through some of these points. We can't be, you know,
So would you like to make a motion?
well, I think we, the director of planning brought up her report, and there were areas that need tweaking. I think we need to address them point by point, or
I agree. And so what I'm
could
hearing
drag
from
on for another year.
right. So what I'm hearing from a number of you is that you would like to make a motion about STRs being unhosted. And so, I mean, that,
That they would be permitted unhosted under the following
right.
criteria.
So feel free, if you could maybe make a motion that way, and we'll vote on it and we'll see where it goes. Councillor Lumley.
I think that's a great idea, and but I think they should also be capped at if you're on off-site host. I think you should be capped at the number of STRs you could own, which would be one, as far as I'm concerned. So if you're a resident, if you're a resident of Gibsons, you can't have 5 or 6 STRs. So, and I think what we're trying to look for is a balance. We still need STRs in the community, right? We need accommodation for tourism, but we're just trying to find that balance. So I think that's, there's the one way. It may be like the as it sits now. I think it's a little too extreme. And the other way of just opening it up to everybody, I think, I mean, there's no way that our bylaw officer and a half a bylaw officer is going to be able, like, I mean, you could probably ask them now how busy they are. They're not going to be running around like monitoring, like, I mean, I understand what Councillor DeAndre is saying is that, if you cap the number of nights, the people are going to go, well, what's the point? I might as well just rent this out long term and get a monthly income, pay down, like people say, oh, we want to pay down our mortgage. Well, you can pay down your mortgage. I don't know if anyone's seen how much it costs to rent a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment in this town, but it's not cheap. And guess what? It covers a mortgage. So that would be their alternative. And that's a good idea too. I like that idea as well. Is that because and then presumably they would have to report their days on their business license, like the list of all the, like the fire and all those things that they attest to. Assumedly, at some point they're going to say, "Listen, my residence or my secondary residence is going to be a short-term rental from from April to the end of August," and then that's what they're gonna have on their business license, I would imagine. So anyway, there's quite a bit involved to make a motion, I think, and I also agree. I agree with the whole zoning comment, and I also agree if you have a commercial like Martin at the Beachcomber, yeah. Why can't you rent that out? Those things should be changed for sure. I just think having somebody on site is a little too restrictive and kind of creepy in a way at the same time, but that's just me.
But can I just jump in there for a second? I think what would happen is STRs would change over time. Like, we really are at a point where this industry is sort of just evolving and changing. And yeah, it's true. Some people go, you know what? This STR isn't going to work for me now if I have to have somebody on site. So maybe they will sell the property. And maybe other people say, but I want a property where I can come and visit once in a while and use my recreational property. So maybe they'll sell that one and buy one with a little small secondary suite that they can come and stay in when they come to visit, but they can rent out the other suite full time. Like, I think things will shift, but it doesn't mean that there isn't going to be accommodation provided. And I think people there'll be an adjustment. And I do think, like, I'm sticking to this concept that if you're running a property and if you're buying a business, sorry, if you're buying a property to run a business out of it, it has no business being in a residential zone. That's not what it's for.
We
The word
could-
resident
well-
implies that there's a resident on site, and we know that that takes away from long-term rentals.
I just think that major shift is going to penalize too many local Gibsonites that have been operating STRs and managing themselves locally. I think that it will just penalize the citizens that are actually doing a proper job of it. For the most part, I probably believe that they are, because they live here, they live in the community. They're conscientious of renting out their spot as an STR. I think just that sweeping change that you have to be on the property, I'm just afraid it's going to penalize them. That's all. It's a pretty major, would be a pretty major blow to these people. People that don't live here, well.
I mean, it's true. They'll just long-term rentals.
Yeah. Oh, and I agree with Councillor Kroll too. I mean, I don't know, I mean, it would have to go back to staff or somebody would, but yeah, if you're using your property as an STR, which is essentially a business, well, then that property should just pay business tax. And if you have a license to operate an STR on your property, well, then they just fall into the, like, I don't know, like the zoning implications or anything like that, but why couldn't that just fall under, now you could just fall under the commercial tax rate, without rezoning the property commercial. I don't know if that's possible, but that would make more sense than anything. So anyway.
How are we doing for time? 4:18. Director of Planning.
One point of clarification, through the engagement that we did a year ago with short-term rental operators, and it was open to everybody, but mostly operators showed up to the dialogues. Most of them were operating short-term rentals in secondary suites or garden suites. So they were actually on their property. So it's a smaller group of unhosted short-term rental operators at this, or a smaller group of short-term rental operators that this is going to affect by requiring an on-site host.
See, that's interesting, because I remember thinking we didn't get as much interest in this topic as I would have expected. And I think it's because it actually doesn't affect that many people, because most people running short-term rentals here live here, I think. And so I mean like negatively impact them in this way by requiring an on-site operator, because they actually are on site. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move that we support unhosted short-term rentals in the community where the owner is resident in the community. Can we get that far?
Does someone want to second that? That is Councillor Lumley second it. All in favor? Okay, so what can corporate officer, when it's a draw, does that mean it just doesn't pass?
Did you call a vote for and a vote opposed?
All opposed, sorry.
Opposed.
Two opposed? Yeah.
So clarification, if I may. So you're saying that if someone has a short-term rental in the community that they're currently operating as a standalone, right, that you're not supporting it. So now you're one in the commercial zone you're not supporting because that's unhosted.
Okay.
Correct? Yeah.
So I guess it's just, so really, I mean, that's what makes this bylaw interesting. It's really a residential bylaw is really what it is. And so, yes, you're right. In the residential zone, it would need further clarification. Correct.
So can we, because if someone is in the community, they may be living in a condo and they have their home that their previous home that they're currently operating as a short-term rental. And as Councillor Lumley was saying, you're now penalizing them because you're saying they have to be resident in the property. I have objection to people that have 3 and 4 units and they're operating, through a numbered company and they're living in the Grand Caymans.
Okay, well, the motion you just suggested didn't address that.
I said the short-term, the unhosted short-term rental in the community if the owner is resident in the town of Gibsons.
Right, but they could own 3 of them.
No, just one.
But it didn't. Okay,
But-
Councillor DiAndretti.
No, we have to start at some point, and then we can, you know, that we will permit a standalone short-term rental in the community. Then we refine it to one standalone short-term rental per local resident.
I'll add that to your motion.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just trying to get a point that we could start from.
Well, I guess it got
Right
defeated.
now, we're running all over the place and we've got less than 20 minutes for this meeting.
Can I make a comment? I think we should not forget what the law is about. The law is about not letting housing becoming a business necessarily, right?
Well, it is.
So
The housing is becoming a commodity.
But that's what it is. And that's why but at the same time, let's consider that some people have vacation homes here. And if we cap the number of days, then they would have their property for, let's say, 60 days, but they cannot run necessarily full-time as a STR. So if they are actually coming and enjoy their homes and they're just using this extra to support them. And the way one comment was made that
Anne-Marie,
let me just
let Councillor DiAndretti finish.
let me one comment that was made, we don't have the capacity to monitor, but then we also have on the bylaw, the current bylaw now, that the owner of the property can only use one STR at a time. So if they have 2 extra houses, they can only use one at a time. But what about if they use 2 at a time? Who is going to monitor? So we end up on the same issue of monitoring. So in this regard, then we cannot have this kind of bylaw as well, because some owner with 2 spaces, they can go and contravene the law. So we need to, I think, and perhaps this is a reason to increase the fee for short term. But I think we cannot forget, if you use a house as a business, if it's not my property and I'm using just a house as a full-time STR unhosted, then I think we are really taking spaces from the long term. And I think we cannot forget that. Vacation is different. And then say, sorry, you can do for 60 days.
Okay, Councillor Crowe.
okay, all I'm saying is we have to start somewhere. Like, I'm not totally disagreeing with Councillor DiAndretti, but what I'm saying is right now we've got nothing on the table.
Try it
We have
again.
no bylaw, we have no public hearing that we can go with. So what I'm saying is if we start with standalone is acceptable, provided the owner is resident in the community. That's one level. With respect to people that have a vacation home here, technically they are resident in the community for that part of the year, right? I don't know how many, people are not likely to have 2 or 3 local vacation spots, and we can limit the number per registered owner, because we know through the business license who owns it and through the tax roll who owns it.
Director of Planning, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, I was going to put something on the table to consider. I'm just trying to capture everything, so it might not be what you're looking for, but we could tweak it anyway. So that staff, so here's a possible motion, that staff bring forward a report that amends zoning amendment bylaw number 1065-47/2020 for the purpose of allowing an unhosted short-term rental with the following criteria. 1, only 1 unhosted short-term rental per owner. 2, unhosted short-term rental operator must be a resident in Gibsons, in the town of Gibsons. 3, unhosted short-term rental can only be rented for a period of 60 days or whatever that number is, for allow in all commercial zones.
Well, I have to say I like that better than anything else I've heard.
That still limits it to 1 unit we still have the limit of 1 dwelling unit per property. We'd have to tweak that for the commercial zones, or maybe for real estate property or something like that. So I'll have to figure out that wording, and we'd have to remove we'd have to tweak the wording around the administration by a person who lives on the property, unless this council wants that in place, but also what I just read out as an avenue for people to do unhosted short-term rentals.
So I just want to point out, like, I mean, I've got a long-term rental. I could just turn around now and STR it. Like, I don't know, just
60 days, a year.
okay. Well, but so we should also do the math on that, because from what I understand, in 60 days, you can earn as much if you pick July and August as what you can get in rent throughout the year, or close to it. So it's an interesting.
It also limits it to the commercial zones piece. So if that's all one criteria, then that's also saying in a commercial zone, only 60 days, unless the PDC wants that.
No, I would like to see commercial. It's like a business. If they should be allowed to run a business in a commercial zone, it is a business that we're talking about. They're paying 3 times as much as taxes.
Yeah, so allowing it in commercial zones would allow all apartments in commercial zones. So that's all the apartments at Soames Place.
I find that interesting, because those apartments are privately owned residential above
commercial. It's a commercial zone. So that applies to Lower Gibsons as well, and Upper Gibsons.
Right. And yet they're, I have to think about that more. Sorry, Councillor Lundley.
Sorry, 2 questions. I guess what you said, which I agree with, like most of it, without the little bit of tweaking that it needs, would replace A in the bylaws that we went over earlier, right? Like the visual bylaws. That what you're suggesting would just replace A, would it not?
Sorry, what's A?
Or number 1, like the bylaw that said. I don't have it in front. I can't see it because
the one about the short-term rental accommodation shall be administered by a person who lives on the property full-time.
Yes. So what you're suggesting there would just replace that paragraph. Is that correct? No?
No. What I'm suggesting is we would have, well, I'm not sure how it would be written, but we would have criteria for unhosted short-term rentals.
Okay.
But in any other short-term rental situation, a resident.
And then the only other thing, just the point, and I know you're against it, but if what the director of planning and you agreed upon already is that there's not that many of them. So I don't know what we would be fearful of it then, if most of them are already in that position. I just don't want to, I don't know. I just think it would be, I don't really feel like hurting people and I know 2 or 3 people. In fact, I know somebody that lives next to the next property that has a short-term rental in a very small place that's attached to a property that they also rent, but they're not on site. I mean, we heard a few stories during the public hearing where, the people live here, they have STRs, they have families. Some of them also have long-term rentals. I just don't want to punish those people. That's all. I'm not saying, hey, let's get a flood of everybody getting an STR. Anyway, that's, again, beating the drum.
I know. We got it. I'm liking where the director of planning is headed with this, whether I end up voting in support of it or not in the end, either way. But I think if the director of planning, like, I think that report sounds like a good move forward. So Councillor Crolla and Councillor DeAndretti have comments. Is that?
I was just going to suggest that we take the director of planning's recommendation and go through it line by line and just sort of massage it a bit. So, we have something to come out of this meeting with, rather than going away and waiting for another report to come back.
Councillor DeAndretti?
Well, I just want to add, if staff feel, I'm not sure if the fees are commensurable with the cost of reinforcement, and I think it's important, right? Because I noticed on the report there was like, oh, unhosted double. I'm not sure why is this double. I think it's important that at the end of the day we need to have capacity, right? So if we're gonna have a bylaw, it must be reinforced. So I'm just like I don't know if it needs a revision, but just to consider that.
Director of Planning.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So when we write bylaws, we always keep that in mind. What is the enforcement? How do we enforce it? Is it enforceable? So absolutely, that is at the forefront of all of our bylaws that we write.
So Director, sorry, okay, Councillor Kroll, last comment, and then.
Well, just further to the fees issue, my understanding is through the Municipal Act, fees they can only be a certain amount under the Act. They can be set so they can be levied daily, but you can't just sort of arbitrarily say, I'm going to have a $5,000 fee. They're governed by the Municipal Act.
Okay, so does somebody want to move the Director of Planning's recommendation for staff to come back with a report outlining the parameters that we discussed? Okay, Councillor Kroll, I take that.
Just one comment, if I may, is that if we can perhaps, while we still have a bit of time left, add a couple or get a couple of the wrinkles out of it so they don't have, they may be able to just come back to a public hearing rather than, because most of the bylaw is, the sticking point of the whole bylaw are the unhosted.
Yeah, I wouldn't support having this come to council tonight if that's what you're trying to do. So
I wasn't suggesting that, but at least, I'd just like to see a few more, because we've been sort of wandering all over the place. And I think, all I'm looking to do is give staff a little more direction rather than it come back and we're right back again all over the place tweaking it.
Director of Planning, do you feel you need more direction? Like, it sounds to me like I think the three councillors here are on the same page. I'm not sure where I sit, but that's all you need to pass. So I mean, that's why we're a group.
Yeah, I do need a motion or a recommendation to go to council so that I can rewrite the bylaw or make the tweaks. And then what I'll do is I'll make those changes, bring back a report to council scheduling the next public hearing. And it'll be giving a second reading as amended as well.
I understand that you need a motion, but do you feel that you've heard enough from everyone here this evening to be able to come back to us with a report? Do we need to discuss this any further?
Well, I'll need you to vote on it.
Yes,
pass something. But yeah, if you pass what I've suggested, I'm just typing it out. I was thinking I could screen share it so you can see it.
That would be great.
Okay.
And the corporate officer has some suggestion on the chat box.
Oh, really? Okay.
Chat?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's shared to everybody. Okay.
So the corporate officers the corporate officers has a suggested motion wording that staff bring forward a report that amends zoning amendment bylaw numbers 1065-47-2020. Oh, I'm getting the hand.
Sorry, I raised my hand if the camera would pick it up. That was sent out before the Director of Planning came out with a much more specific and better directed one. So I'd suggest going with hers if she has it written up.
Sorry, I had it in our chat. I thought that was for everybody, but I can't copy it. So I have to read it.
Here, I've got it. I can put it up.
Okay, thanks.
1 second here.
All right. The recommendation is that staff bring, oh, my eyes aren't that good anymore.
Here, I can.
Okay. Okay, the recommendation is that staff bring forward a report that amends zoning amendment bylaw number 106547 2020 for the purpose of allowing an unhosted STR with the following criteria. Only one unhosted STR per owner. Unhosted STR operator must be a resident in Gibsons. Unhosted STR can only be rented for a period of 60 days and allowed in all commercial zones. Somebody want to move that? Moving it?
Chair,
Councillor Kroll.
I think we need to clarify unhosted STR can only be rented for a period of 60 days. I think from what Councillor Dandretti was suggesting, that is for properties that are, quote, vacation rentals that the owner is off coast. We're dealing with two separate issues here.
Agreed.
So I think we need to clarify point 3, that unhosted STRs can only be rented for 60 days by owners who have a vacation, a part-time Sunshine or Gibson's vacation rental or vacation home.
Actually, the terminology will be short-term rental nights because it's not necessarily 60 days in a row. The only issue with, I think we should not forget the purpose of this bylaw, and by allowing someone that has a property here to be unhosted and full-time, that means now a residence that it could have gone to the long-term market is not going. While a vacation home, many people said, it's not gonna go anyways because I come to this property. So you're saying, okay, you come, you bring your family. So for 60 nights you are allowed, but it's not 60 short-term nights, but it's not a full-time business.
Councillor Lumley.
I'm really confused on that one now. I'm like severely confused. So.
Oh, I mean, they don't live in Gibsons then, probably.
Well, yeah, because they're not a resident here, which we've already said in the thing that you had to be a resident. Mm-hmm. So if someone's got a vacation home here, why can they operate it as an STR at all? It's just their vacation home. And if it's their vacation home, I could only assume that they'd be vacationing here when the only times you'd probably want to be renting it out as an STR. So I'm confused on that level. And then the allowed in commercial zones, the only other aspect with that is that I guess it can be brought back in the report, but I'd just like to bring up the point that I'm pretty sure that the development on Industrial Way has like 34 rental units going in the commercial zone. So I don't know how that would impact or how this would impact that.
So good point. And those are the things I need to think about this more. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm not prepared to
But we can vote to bring it back.
Agreed.
But it doesn't have to be perfect. But I'm just confused I am confused a bit, because if you have an STR, you have to be a resident. And then we start making exceptions for non-residents, I think that'll get so muddy. Like it'll get too confusing. I think either go with, you have to be a resident of Gibsons, or I mean, it is what it is. I think.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Councillor Kroll.
I would support this motion with the exclusion of item 3 and allowed in all commercial zones in the lower historic village.
I would second that for a report to come back. Councillor D'Andrade.
Well, now I am confused. So I can, as a resident of Gibsons, rent a home, let's say for $3,000 a month, and now I have a business and I make $10,000 in vacation. So I'm taking this home from the market. Oh, so right. I think the purpose of allowing people who have vacation homes is like, okay, it's vacation. They're going to come with their family anyways. And if they try to run a business full time, they can't. So it's just allowing that. There's also a supply of many rental homes, could be even, close to the ocean in nice locations. So you're saying, okay. And the 60 days, it could be, we could even scrutinize this more. I think this is something that I saw that municipalities, but to allow people that live here, I can rent another home and now this is my business. Unhosted, could be a house in front of my house, and I do full time. And I think that's what we need to remember. The purpose of this bylaw is to increase the housing availability. But for the people who have vacation and they are saying, I'm not going to rent because I come here and I have family that comes. So the issue is, can we reinforce that to me? Because just to say, no, you can't. But to allow that unhosted. I understand what Councillor Lumley is saying is like, okay, someone has a small house in their property, but it doesn't live there. Perhaps the operator has to be the person who lives in the property, not the owner. I don't know, but I think that's delicate.
No, I agree with you, because the number one brings us back to this whole issue about running a commercial business in a residential zone. It's like, when did the residential zone become a business area? Shoot, eh, guys? Councillor Lumley.
Okay. I'm a little clearer to what Councillor DeAndrade was saying with respect, but I think it still opens the door for anybody off coast to purchase a home and say, hey, this is my vacation home, but I'm not going to be here these 60 days. I'm just going to run it as an STR with no intentions of ever using it as a vacation home. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just leaves the door wide open for the same thing that's happening right now. And true to what Chair Ladwig said, was that even if you said 60 days, if you look on Airbnb, people are getting $300 and more per night for their Airbnbs. So that's $18,000. And that just might be enough for someone to buy a house and run it as an STR and say, yeah, it's my vacation home. I'm just saying, it just leaves the door for non-residents to continue to do what they're doing. Right. So anyway, that's why I said it muddies the water. I agree with 60 days. I'm just afraid that then what's the point of like stopping anybody from doing everything? The bylaw should just be, hey, no owner of any STR can rent it for more than 60 days. You know, I'm just not, that's my only confusion in it.
This is just bringing me all right back to no unhosted STRs. Anyways, so I'm going to stay in my position about, I think for the purpose of this discussion, to want to see hosted STRs in all residential zones. I'm going to stick to that for right now. If you guys want to pass this motion, then please do, and we'll have a report come back and we'll see what they have to say.
I'm going to move this, please, as written.
As written. Thank you, Councillor Lumley. Seconded by Councillor Kroll. All in favor? Okay, and I'll be opposed. Thank you. At least we moved it along. All right. So,
thanks, Leslie-Ann.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm not saying I'll be opposed to it in the end. I just, I need more time to think about it. And I think that was a great progress. It was a good discussion, as painful as it was. Okay. So,
let me just a comment. I think we are still in and I understand that sometimes there's some rush to do, but I think this is a very delicate subject, and Seashelt is doing as well. And they even have some clauses that is not in our bylaw. I think checking the guest and things like that. I mean, I think we can evolve, and I'm open. I mean, 60 days, it's the minimum I found in terms of the 60 days, really, even with $300 rent pays for the whole year to maintain a house. probably not, but I'm happy. That's why I would like staff feedback, and perhaps we decrease this number to 40 days. You know, I think it's just giving the opportunity for someone who does come, who has a house here and is doing this, and having some unhosted for some short period of time. So
Yeah.
it's not really
I
killing.
understand, and I'm glad we've made that motion. So we've got 15 minutes, and I do want to move on. I mean, I'm already kind of regretting opposing it because I still like the last bullet, but that's the whole point of a report. It's going to come back,
Mhm.
and we'll break it down and discuss it again. So thank you, everyone. Let's move on. Next, we have inquiries. Is there any inquiries in the audience?
At this time, I'll ask anybody in the audience who'd like to ask a question of the Planning and Development Committee, please raise your hand. And so far we have 2. I'll just move them over to speak.
Hello, Des.
Hey there. Got good discussion, guys. It's a really tough thing. I just want to add something in as an Airbnb operator, just to give you some extra information. Because of this COVID pandemic, Airbnb has just put some new rules in place. They automatically monitor all unhosted Airbnbs. When they have several complaints, they cancel the Airbnb listing. It is no longer listed on their platform. So they are self-regulating already, because you've got to remember Airbnb is an international business, and their business model's taking a beating with all these complaints as well. And they are responding as they should and as the operators should. So I think that in itself is policing. Second thing, 2 weeks ago, there was worldwide, they realized there was a lot of one-night bookings for Halloween, and they canceled them all. Because they suspected that people were booking them for parties, and they didn't get any complaints. So, you know, things progress a lot faster. This has been going on for a year. What you've got doing now, I mean, you've got no opposition from anybody that's got an Airbnb in the residence. The unhosted is a real problem. I think, you know, we're moving in the right direction. There are ways around that. But I think, I mean, you guys are aware, most people are actually responsible operators, and especially with the unhosted. So, I mean, that's great. We've just been a tweaking. I think we're just about there. So thank you.
Thanks, Des. I think we've got one other question from Connie. Connie, oh, there you go.
Hi, Chairperson, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for taking my question. I heard a lot of discussion about restrictions for off-coast STR owners. And then when you looked at doing your motion, you made reference to Gibsons residents. So is there going to be restrictions for coast residents who may not be residents of the town of Gibsons that own properties for short-term rentals within the property, within the municipality? Someone that lives in Elphinstone, or perhaps someone that lives in West Howe Sound that's very close to Gibsons, but not a Gibsons resident?
Well, that's a great question, Connie. The way it's written right now, I guess there would be restrictions, but I think that's a level of detail that we probably haven't thought through yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll wait for the report. Councillor Crowell.
I was just going to say, Councillor Dendretti addressed Seashell's bylaw, and what I think they have in their guides for application for a permit is that the owner has to be able to respond in a timely manner. So, you know, were we to tweak it in that direction, that if someone, that they are coast resident and are able to respond to their unit in a timely manner, would probably cover it.
Okay. All right. Well, I think if there's any more inquiries from the audience, then I think we can adjourn. The next Planning and Development Committee meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, December 1st. And I think that's all the business we have for this afternoon. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Councillor Lumley, Councillor Kroll, all in favor. Till next time. Thanks, everyone. See you this